Hi, let's do a giant summer TBR. Hi, I'm Colleen Delaney. Welcome if you've never been here before. I talk about books and writing. In the description, I always put links to like my newsletter and stuff like that. You can check out if you want to. And if you have a fun time, please subscribe and hang out more frequently. I have a very large pile of books right here on this very tippy like TV tray table that I don't know if it's going to be able to handle this, but it's a lot of the books I'm planning to read this summer. It's not going to be all of them because it's the beginning of June and I'm not going to give myself a book buying ban for the entire summer. I usually give myself a no by July. So I will probably buy a couple books in June. And by probably, I mean like most definitely the new Lore Olympus because I haven't bought it yet. Carol Goodman has a book coming out, I think in July. She's my favorite mystery author. So I will pre-order that in June so I can read it. And then I always get books from Book of the Month. If any of my friends release a book, I'll buy it. So this is just like a good starting point. It's also probably at the same time more than I can read this summer. I mean, I could probably, if I really tried hard, get through all of these, but we'll see what happens. I'm going to do things a little differently today, and I'm going to start with my Kindle reads because in June, for part of the month, I'm going to be on vacation with my family for about 9 days. And if you are a parent, you know that when you are in a hotel room with small children, the lights go off much earlier than you want them to. So you will read a lot on your Kindle. Okay, so I'm currently 22% of the way through Wake Me Most Wickedly by Felicia. There's like a mark right over her first name, Grossman. And I'm going to finish that probably before we go on vacation. It's a Regency, but it's a little different because it's the main characters are Jewish living in London. They take place in the East End, which I really like because that's the neighborhood I lived in when I lived in London. And I'm liking it. I've kind of been using it as like my book I'm reading when I can't fall asleep, which I always feel a little guilty for those because those books I tend to not remember the plot as well. But so far it's fun. I have Jewel Me Twice by Cherish Reed, which I'm extremely excited to read. I actually bought the paperback also, and it's going to be en route, but I got the ARC, so I'm going to read it first. And it'll be a fun one for me to read in the middle of the night when I'm sitting by myself. I bought a beach read box set with a ton of different authors in it, one of whom is Kate Canterbury, I believe. That's why I bought it. Yes, and Penny Reed has a story in there, so I'll probably read both of those and maybe another one that I can find. And then, I got a arc called A Dark and Secret Magic by Wallace Kinney. That's like a paranormal romance, I think, that I grabbed. I have the new Lindsay Sands, The Highlander Returns, which is the newest book in the Highlander Bride series, which I have been reading out of order. I downloaded a ton of samples of different paranormal romances I wanted to try. So I'm going to read a little bit of them and then see if I like them. I did download this one completely, not just the samples. Spellbound Phase Shifters by Blossom Seafarer. And then, so that one I have the whole one of, so I'll probably read that on vacation. I have Under the Oak Tree, which I've just been seeing that everywhere on Amazon. I don't even really know what it's about. A book called Seduced by a Selkie and How to Date Your Dragon. Sorry, I'm not reading the authors' names. Every single one of them is very hard to read on my Kindle. I have like an old school Kindle that it's black and white and my eyesight's just not that good. The Lovely Dark, which is a collection of novellas, and Juliet Cross has one in, who I love her. She wrote the Stay a Spell series. And I think that's all of them. So I have quite a bit to get me through those lights off at 8:30 evenings where I probably won't fall asleep till after midnight. Now let's move on to my physical copybooks, which there are a lot of. Let's start with romance. Speaking of Lindsay Sands, I have Falling for the Highlander, which is one of the Highland Bride series, which I am reading out of order, as I said before. This is about Dougal Buchanan. So there's a lot of Buchanan brothers in it. And this is Dougal's story. And then Lady Muriel Carmichael is the heroine, and she is like in a bad place. She has a half brother who tries to like sell her in exchange for horses, and then Dougal like saves her. And I do love a medieval romp. These books are like bonkers, as if you've been watching my wrap-ups. There's always like so many head injuries and stabbings that you would have no business surviving, even in like 1950, let alone when are we, 1300? But they're just so fun. So I'll definitely read this summer. Next, I have The Virgin and the Rogue by Sophie Jordan. This is my last book in the Rogue File series, which I'm a little sad about. I love Sophie Jordan so much. She has another series that's like in the process of being released. But I think after I finish this one, I've read all of her Regency, like historical romance backlist, which makes me a little bit sad. This is about Charlotte Langley, and we know her sisters. I've read this is book 6, and I've already read book 7. So I've already read her younger sister's story, but she is like a healer, and she makes this tonic, and it's supposed to be, I think, like painkiller maybe, and it turns out to kind of be like Viagra, and that's what happens, which is going to be funny and fun. Next, I grabbed Witch of Wild Things by Raquel Vasquez Gilliant, and this is about Sage Flores, who is a witch, and she has witchy sisters, and it's a witchy romance. And if you know me, I just wrote a very witchy book, which is right here, so I can pull that and show it to you. The Hedge Witch. And this came out in May, and this sounded kind of similar, and I really like, witchy sister books, obviously, if I'm writing a whole series about them. So when I saw this at the bookstore, I was like, oh, I'm going to read that this summer. That'll be so fun. Continue now with romance. I have Bride by Allie Hazelwood. I started this, I'm on page 62, and then I was kind of like a little bit bored, I'm going to be honest. But then someone whose opinion I do trust on Twitter told me you kind of have to get through the first like 100 pages before you really feel like immersed in the story. So I will give this I'll probably give it to like page 150 and see if I'm feeling it. And if I'm not feeling it, then I'll probably just sell it, because a lot of people want to read this book. So it'd be easy to sell in Marketplace. But hopefully I'll fall in love with it and I'll actually like it. That would be the best case scenario. This is a vampire werewolf romance. It's my first Allie Hazelwood. I'm not really like a rom-com reader, but I love paranormal romance, which is why I grabbed this one. Next, I have One Little Mistake by Avery Maxwell. I grabbed this when I was at a new romance bookstore that opened not like close to my house, but within an hour of a drive to my house. And it's a contemporary romance, like not a rom-com. And if I'm going to read like a contemporary, I don't really want it to be a rom-com. I tend to more like it be like a little bit angsty. So I just bought it kind of on a whim. But I think it's gonna be one of those books that I just sort of fly through. It's the first in a series, seemed like a lot of fun. Next, I have The Lost Elemental by Tessa Hale. It's kind of a weird thing. I saw this at the romance bookstore that I went to, but my publisher called her a comp of mine, and I had never read any of her books. So I was like, oh, well, I should read some of her books. And then I went to this bookstore and they had them. And so I got this one, which is the first book in the Royals of Kingwood Academy book. And I think it's going to be like a magical school, but with a romance. And I think it's new adult. Like, I don't think they're in high school. I think they're maybe like college age level, but it has really cool chapter headings, which I'm a sucker for. So looking forward to that. This is most likely going to be the book I read next. And it's Underneath It All by Kate Canterbury. It's the first book in the Walsh family series, which I think has like 9 books in it. Kate Canterbury writes contemporary, but not rom-com, which is my brand of contemporary that I like, or my flavor that I enjoy. It takes place in Boston. It's a family of 6 kids. So maybe it's less than 9. No, maybe I think some cousins have some books. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It is like, there's like architecture in it, which seems like it might be fun. I don't know. We'll see if I like it. I know I'll like it. It's Kate Canterbury. And then my last romance for now is The Witch Collector by Trisha Weeks. I've been wanting to read this for a very long time. Finally got it. The only thing is this is like a winter vibes book. So I will probably read this either if we have like a horrible heat wave and I am dying and just want to feel cool for a little while in like July or August, or I'll read it in August when I'm already starting to feel like I want to feel like cozier. But so I'm not going to read this in June or July, I don't think. Maybe July if we have a heat wave, most likely August. This is like high fantasy romance. And apparently the hero has like vibes if you mix, I think it was if you mix Geralt, oh my God. I think the hero has vibes if you mix Geralt from The Witcher and Aragorn. I think that's what I read. Yes, please. Okay, so now I just have like a giant stack of other, because I was gonna like put these in different categories and then I just decided I'm not gonna do that. So the first book I have is What You Are Looking For Is in the Library by Michiko Aoyama. And I got this because it looks adorable and I've heard about it. And I really like books about books. So it's about a librarian who works in Tokyo and she can sense what you need when you come to the library, which sounded really fun. It sort of gave me like the vibes of Before the Coffee Gets Cold, like a little bit like quirky. It's got some cute pictures in it too, some cute illustrations. And I think each chapter is a person who comes to the library. So I have a feeling it's going to be one of those books that feels almost like a collection of short stories, which I do really like books like that. I feel like those are really fun reads when you like just get like little snippet full stories. That feels very much like my life right now. Next, I have my big honker, which I am not going to finish this summer, but I do hope I at least start it. And it's The Wheel of Time. Yeah, I really like the Amazon Prime series, The Wheel of Time. And I was like, maybe I'll read this book. And so I have it. And I don't know if I will. I get like very intimidated by long books, which is weird because when I was younger, I read so many long books, but now I feel like it's maybe just the way my brain works. I like consuming stuff that's a little bit shorter. I don't know. Also, there is something to be said about like the whole being on BookTube. And like if I would feel weird being like, and in August I read just this book, which might happen because I feel like you get very book slumpy when you're in books when you try to read books that are basically over 400 pages, maybe over 500. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully I read part of it. I'm just trying to I just want to start it and then I can just read it. I mean, I can take 6 years to read this book if I want to. I just want to start it. Next, I have Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Every summer, I say I put a Taylor Jenkins Reid book on my summer TBR, and every summer, I don't read it till September. So maybe I'll read in the summer. I also consider summer to go through Labor Day weekend, because it does. And maybe it'll be my Labor Day weekend book. Maybe it won't. I don't know. But it's loosely connected to Malibu Rising. You meet Carrie Soto in Malibu Rising. And I've said this before, but like I always read the premise of a Taylor Jenkins Reid book. And I'm like, that doesn't sound that good. And then I flip and love it. So she's just really good at making me interested in stuff that I don't normally think I would be interested in. This one's about tennis. I have The Great Believers by Rebecca Makkai. One of my cousins, I just talked about this. And she's like, oh, I love that book. I sobbed. So I'll probably save this for when I'm feeling like a little emotional. I know it has a lot to do with AIDS in the 80s. So that sounds very sad. It's got two timelines. So one is in 1985 and you're following Yale Tishman. And then one is about 30 years later and a person who's like his friend Nico, who I think dies of AIDS. His younger sister Fiona is trying to find her daughter somewhere. It's like definitely two different plot lines. I've only ever read I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai and I loved it. So I do have high hopes and probably high expectations for this book. So I'm guessing this is going to be probably like a July read when I'm just feeling like, you know what I want to do today? Cry really hard. Then I have Midnight at Blackbird Cafe by Heather Weber. This is like a contemporary fiction, I think, about a woman who goes back to like a town her grandma lived in after her grandma dies. And she's going to like close the restaurant her grandma owns, settle the estate and get out of there. And then she decides to kind of stay for a little bit longer and like learn about what life her grandma led. That sounds just kind of like a nice light story. All right, we have another book that I started and it's I Captured the Castle by Dodie Smith. I told myself. So I read the chapter on March, and the next chapter was about April and May, and I was supposed to read it in April and May, and I did not. In my defense, those were two like the busiest months of the decade for me, so I don't feel bad about it. It's fine. And then the last part is June to October. So I'm just going to try to finish this book before December so that it's on, like I read it in 2024. It's very cute. The beginning was very like, I understand why everybody puts this on like cottagecore book lists because you're in this like falling down castle. It's England. These people are like that like weird rich poor where like they're really poor, but they like cannot work, which is just so weird. But like literally they won't get regular jobs. One of the daughters is like maybe going to become a prostitute rather than like just get a job. But like, so it's funny. It's sweet. All right. You know, if you know me, you know I love Alice Hoffman more than anything. Oh my gosh. A quick aside. If you follow me on Instagram, a couple days ago, I did like a book stack with my book and Grimoire Girl, which you'll hear. I don't remember the order in which my videos are going out. It's a book I read in May. And a Julia Cross book, and was like, if you loved these witchy books, look at my witchy book that goes also in this pile. And I tagged the authors. And Alice Hoffman liked it. hand shared it to her stories, which just, please let me faint. Okay, so for my Alice Hoffman read this summer, I have Here on Earth, which I don't really know anything about and I don't really want to read the back cover of. I bought this at my town's used book sale in September, but I also got Skylight Confessions and The Red Garden. And I had also just read The Invisible Hour, which was her book that came out in September. And I do kind of like to space them out a little bit because I do find her books not always, but they can be very emotionally draining and extremely sad. Skylight Confessions was, I think I read that in March. I can't remember exactly when I read it. But so I've been kind of waiting before I read Here on Earth, but I think I'll probably read this in June or July because I do just really love Alice Hoffman. Her books are great also if you want to read a book in a day. I feel like specifically Blackbird House, The Red Garden, The Ice Queen, and Skylight Confessions. I think I read all of those in under 2 days. Like I might not have read them all in one day, but I definitely read them in probably a 24-hour period. They're fantastic, and I have high hopes for this one as well. Now it's time for my Book of the Month books that I've ordered, and obviously there will be some coming in for July and for August, which I don't know what those will be yet. I got a lot of Book of the Month books in May because it was my birthday, and I have so many credits, it's a little bit overwhelming. So because when you have extra credits, you still have to pay your monthly fee. So for me, it makes sense to buy like a ton of books from Book of the Month each month because I have so many credits. So I only read one so far in May, and then I bought 4 in May, and then I already had 2 that I hadn't read yet. And so I only read 1 in May. And so right now I have 5 I haven't read, and I did just do my order last night, and I ordered 3 more. So I'm probably, oh my God. Maybe I'm not going to read that Kate Kinderberg book next. Actually, I think I'm going to read this book next because it's going to be a fast read and I can just, gosh. I should try to finish 2 of these before my box comes, which I do that sometimes, and it is kind of a good habit to be like, okay, well, I've got 3 more books coming from Book of the Month. I have 5 unread. I need to get that down to 3, so I'll have 6 unread. Oh my gosh. Wouldn't it be nice, because I am going on like this long plane flight with my family, wouldn't it be nice if I could think to myself, oh, I'm going to read like the whole flight. I'm probably not going to read it all. The one I think I'm probably going to start this afternoon is The Return of Ellie Black by Amiko Jean. This is set in the Pacific Northwest, and it's about a woman whose sister was missing, but a girl comes back that's been missing. Like there's been a lot of missing girls, and now she thinks she can figure out where everybody went and what happened because of this girl coming back. I'm excited to read that. I think that'll be a good thriller. I love the Pacific Northwest. The one book I did read in May was also set in the Pacific Northwest, and it was a thriller, and I just really like that as a setting for thrillers. And honestly, I think this will be a book. Thrillers and romances, I read them in like 2 or 3 days at most, so it'll be fun. I would wish, if it was like, my kids only have 3 more days of school. I wish it was a beautiful day out, because then I would just go sit in the sun and read all day, but it's quite chilly, and I think it's supposed to rain the rest of the days that are at school, so that is what it is. Next, I have The Ministry of Time by Kayleen Bradley. This is a book about time travel and romance. So it's a book about someone who is in charge of like watching a person they've brought to the future from the past, and then she falls in love with him and he falls in love with her, and I thought that would be a cool premise. I think it might be sad, so we'll see if it is. But there's another one I've got for the summer. Next, I have Familia by Lauren E. Rico. This is about 2 sisters who were not raised together, and then they, as adults, get back together and like figure out how they're gonna live as sisters. And I really like sister stories a lot. I have 2 sisters, and I also have 2 brothers. I like sibling stories, I should say. I shouldn't cut them out. And I really like reading about family relations, so I think I'll enjoy this one. Next, I have The Great Divide by Cristina Enriquez, which is it's like a fictionalized version of what it was like to build the Panama Canal, which I'm also really excited to read. I just haven't really felt like reading historical fiction lately. I don't think I've read a historical fiction in like months. I don't even know if I read one this year. Oh my gosh, I'll have to look at my Goodreads and see if I have read one this year. But I'm due for historical fiction, so I'm looking at you, The Great Divide. It's coming. And then my last Book of the Month book that I have currently in my possession is Shark Heart by Emily Haybeck. I started this I'm only on page 18, so I'm going to start it over. But it's definitely a book you can like read in a day because there's just like not a lot of text on each page. And I started it on a day where I thought I was going to be able to read a book in a day, but it was just one of those days where like, I like got my chair, got in my backyard spot, which is literally like in bushes. This was before the cicadas came because now that would be really uncomfortable. But I like started reading and it was like, mom. And then it was literally like my husband was like, hey, I'm like, everybody's interrupting me. I can't get in my vibe of like book in a day. So it'll happen. I'll get there. I'll read this in a day. And who knows, maybe it'll happen. I think it's supposed to rain all day tomorrow. Maybe it'll happen the next day and I'll just dive into it, go crazy, read the whole thing, and then I'll feel good about it. Okay, so here's what I ordered from Book of the Month this month. So it was kind of a weird month for me in that I didn't love any of the main picks, which does happen sometimes, but I wanted Swan Song by Ellen Hilderbrand as an add-on so badly because I really like reading an Ellen Hilderbrand in June. I just do. I think they're great books to kick off the summer. They're like such good summer vibes. So I looked at them a bunch and I looked at the like, not into this month's picks, pick a member fave. And I think I don't even remember what they were. I think that I owned some of them and then the other ones I wasn't interested in. So what I did was I picked Honey by Isabel Banta, which I do find the premise interesting. It's kind of about being a pop star in like the late 90s, early 2000s, which is when I was in high school and college. And I do think that that time period in particular is like really interesting to look at how celebrities were treated. Also, I am like years behind on the podcast Dolls of Our Lives, which if you read American Girl doll books when you were a kid, or you're like a children's literature / history nerd, you should listen to this podcast because it's phenomenal. But I'm really far back on it, and they talk a ton about pop culture as well while they're talking about these books. And they were discussing it's like during the Free Britney campaign, and they were discussing like how much we can say like, oh, that's terrible that paparazzi do this. But then if you're still buying these magazines or visiting these websites with their pictures, you're like complicit kind of in the treatment of these celebrities. And so I was like, I've been like really thinking a lot about that. So I'm like, this would probably be a good book for me to read since I've been thinking a lot about that. So then I also got Swan Song by Ellen Hilderbrand, which we're in Nantucket and there's a house fire and you have to figure out what happened. But I also know we're going to get like all the great Nantucket vibes. And then I picked Shelterwood by Lisa Wingate, which I hadn't heard of. It's a historical fiction, and as I just said, I haven't really been reading historical fiction, so I figured, I've got The Great Divide, I'll get one more. And this is the quick take: an epic excavation of the forgotten history of women pioneers who shielded children from land-baron greed and violence. It's multiple viewpoints, it's a nonlinear timeline, it follows social issues, and it's a rugged read. And then I read the beginning. It's got two timelines, Oklahoma in 1909, and Oklahoma in 1990. And as soon as they said that, I was like, well, I'm gonna love this book because I love dual timelines. And I was literally like just talking about, oh, I know, okay. So my oldest just turned 11 and he's gotten really into like tornadoes. We don't live in Tornado Alley, but we get tornadoes where we live. And we've actually had kind of a active season already considering where we live. So we were talking a lot about Oklahoma. And so that was like, Oklahoma was like in my brain when this came out. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll get this book. It'll probably be really interesting. I read the first few pages and I really liked the author's voice. So that's everything. I didn't even count these books, but I'll count them and put it in my number of books TBR for this summer. I think I'll read most of these. I mean, there's always one or two that end up being on my TBR. Like I was looking at my bookshelf, because this isn't every unread book I have, of the books that I did put on this TBR last year, like my big summer TBR, and there's still probably like 6 up there that I never read. That just happens. But I think I'll do a pretty good job and I'll read most of these. And it's great to like kind of look at the whole season like this, I feel like, instead of like by a month, to be like, these are all the books I want to read in 3 months. Thanks for hanging out for this long. I know this video is a little bit long for a TBR. Those are usually kind of snappy, but if there's a book on this list that you are so excited to read or you've already read and you just want to tell me how wonderful it is, please do so in the comments. Also, like maybe throw your TBR in the comments. If yours is, if you have like 5 books you definitely want to go get to this summer, let me know what they are. If you've made it this far and you don't want to write words, this is 100% a big stack of books emoji video with all these books I have to clean up now. And as always, I hope you're in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. I'll see you soon.